TXR3 is one of the most conflicting games that I've ever played. On a technical level, it feels like it's held together with matchsticks and paper mache, and it feels like it could fall apart at any moment. On the other hand, it has a charm and personality that I find really endearing. Playing this game feels like it was a mod thrown together by your friend who's really excited for you to try it out, and the whole game has that sort of personality to it. There's no voice acting, the music is kinda cheesy, and the handling is really questionable, but despite that, it felt like I couldn't put the game down sometimes. Now, here's the thing that I'm confused about. Growing up, racing games were easily my favorite genre of games that I was allowed to play, as my parents wouldn't let me play the more violent games at the time, so I found my solemn home in racing games. I had played pretty much every popular racing game in the 2000s. Forza Motorsport, Gran Turismo, Need for Speed, Midnight Club, even some of the more obscure games like Street Racing Syndicate and Juiced. I played all these games at some point, but somehow I'd never even heard of any Tokyo Extreme Racer game until the new one got announced last year. There's been a pretty big drought of racing games lately, and the ones that have been coming out have been feeling quite disappointing in my opinion, so when I saw a new Tokyo Extreme Racer game for a budget price of about $30, I decided to give it a shot, and I immediately fell in love. It was so refreshing from a modern point of view to see a racing game that just focused on the actual racing. It didn't have random side content or collectibles or billboards you had to smash. All it had were open roads filled with opponents that you could challenge to a race, and this is exactly what I wanted from a racing game. It didn't have any of the fluff or the shoehorned off-roading sections that were put into the game. It just was racing in its purest form. After finishing the early access version of the new Tokyo Extreme Racer game, which I highly recommend by the way, I went back and saw what the older games were like. After reading some online discussion boards and talking to a personal friend of mine, I decided to play TXR3, as that seemed like the most similar to the new game. The good news though, is if you like the new game and if you like this one, that there's plenty of other Tokyo Extreme Racer games for you to play, and there's actual spin-off games too that focus more on togue racing. I haven't actually played these games yet, and I actually look forward to trying them out. For those of you unaware, Tokyo Extreme Racer is kind of like a love letter to Japanese street racing culture in the late 90s and early 2000s that was heavily inspired by the Midnight Club that was popular in media and movies at the time. The first game came out in 1994 and was actually a sprite-based racing game. The first game was called Shotoku Battle, and it came out on the Super Famicom, which was the Japanese version of the Super Nintendo. In 1999, we got the first Western release on the Dreamcast called Tokyo Extreme Racer. I am assuming the name was changed to Tokyo Extreme Racer for the US because people in the US wouldn't even know what the Shotoku Highway Network is. To add to the confusion, in the PAL region, these games were called Tokyo Highway Challenge until Shotoku Battle Zero, which was called Tokyo Extreme Racer, but in the US it was called Tokyo Extreme Racer Zero as a prequel. The worst part is, when the series made its debut on the Xbox 360, for some reason, they threw away all the goodwill that they had with the name and decided to name it Import Tuner Challenge, so all the people who liked this series on the PS2 didn't even know there was a new game in the series. Yeah, I feel like if I keep going, we're just gonna get chronologically confused, so I'll just be referring to the US titles for this video. To get back on track, what about TXR3? How does it actually play from a perspective of someone who's only played the modern game? Well, to be honest, the first time I played this game, it was kind of a nightmare. When you start the game, you're greeted by a very low-budget intro cinematic. This kind of feels like it was edited like a video 15 years ago, where someone didn't have a voiceover and it was just text on the screen. After the movie, there's no intro, there's no transition, you're immediately thrown into a selection where you have to buy your first car. Well, any doubt I had from the intro was immediately washed away as I looked at the car list and realized there's actually a really good selection here. You have a lot of cars that you would expect, like RX-7s and Silvias, but you also have luxury sedans and even an old Isuzu Piazza. The first car that you buy is pretty important though, because it kind of sets the stage for how difficult the rest of the game is going to be. While the old Mitsubishi Lancer might look cool, it's going to struggle on some of the straightaways in the game, and the beginning of the game will be a lot harder if you choose it, but if you choose something like a 300CX or a Toyota Chaser, it'll be a lot better rounded so you won't struggle nearly as much. The first time that I played the game, I picked the Mitsubishi FTO, and while I actually did like that car, I wanted something that was rear-wheel drive for this playthrough. I decided to go with the Nissan 300ZX, as it has a turbocharger from stock, and it makes a pretty good amount of power right off the bat. One of the things that I really appreciate about this game is how much information it tells you about all the cars. Whenever you go to buy a car in this game, at the bottom of the screen, it'll give you a brief rundown of the history and the development of the car, and also what makes the car special. I actually really appreciate a lot of these descriptions in the game, and I find them a lot more entertaining to read than something you'd find off of Wikipedia or something. Back in the day when this game came out in 2003, most people wouldn't have had as reliable internet back then. Since this game features about 115 cars, this would have been a pretty invaluable resource to have this detailed description about all these different types of vehicles. There's also a specs page which gives you a pretty detailed, accurate description of the length, weight, horsepower, torque, all sorts of different metrics. The only problem is that this wasn't translated into Imperial, so I actually had to do some math.
What the f*** is a kilometer?
And then, whenever you're ready to buy a car, you can choose the color and the license plate. We'll come back to the license plate. Now from here, if you have any extra money, you can go customize your car. Now this was actually a pretty big shock to me. This game has one of the best customization systems in any game from the time period, and I feel like most people don't even mention this when they're talking about the game. In North America, this game came out one day after Need for Speed Underground. That's probably why it didn't sell too well, to be honest. But it actually came out a couple months earlier in Japan, so for a couple months, this was the best customization on the market easily. You have all the basic stuff you would expect, like being able to change your bumpers and side skirts and wheels and stuff like that. You have the option of making your taillights white or blue. I'm not really sure if this is a trend in Japan at the time, but I haven't seen this in any other game, and every time I saw it, it almost made me feel this uncanny feeling. I never did it personally, but something I noticed is if someone else did it in the game, they were probably a pretty fast car that you're supposed to take pretty seriously. You can also give your car a wide body kit, which was pretty unheard of at the time, and you could also make every single piece carbon fiber, including the body once you got max level weight reduction. The body kits in this game are based off of real-world kits, and there are a bunch of wheel manufacturers in the game too. This is the first TXR game to have licensed cars, and this means that they couldn't secure all the licenses they wanted to. Honda is not in this game, which really stands out. So when I first played this game, I was having a grand old time. I had spent probably 20 or 30 minutes tinkering with my car, and I was super excited to actually get it out on the road and see what I could do. After another cheesy cutscene, you get thrown to the C1 highway network, and this is where you actually get to drive your car for the first time.
9mm. Safety always off.
And right off the bat, you're probably gonna crash. When you first start playing this game, I cannot stress enough how bad the handling is. I really wasn't ready for this because the new TXR game doesn't have the best handling, but it's serviceable, it's okay. But the first time that I drove a car in this game, I genuinely smashed into every wall that I came across. This is an awful first impression. I don't know what they were thinking. The thing is though, the more upgrades that you put on your car, the more drivable it becomes. It's a really weird scenario. When you first play the game, it feels like you're driving a Ford Model T with a modern engine strapped onto it. You have to make a million adjustments every time you steer, it's hard to stay inside your lane, and it's hard to do anything properly at this stage of the game. But the weird thing is, if you put on suspension, tires, and maybe add some weight reduction to your car, suddenly it starts driving somewhat normally. It's like this really weird dichotomy, where at the first half of the game, you're fighting the handling trying to stay on the road, and then at the later half of the game, once your car actually does drive properly, you're having to fight the actual opponents in the game more. I can't say I've ever played a racing game of any type that has the handling changed this much between the early and the late game. And if anything, it's usually in the reverse order. Like, in the original Forza Motorsport for instance, right? I thought the handling in that game got really bad towards the later stages of the game because it felt like the game just couldn't keep up with the amount of power that your car is putting down. I just think that it's genuinely hilarious that in the Tokyo Extreme Racer universe, it is easier to drive a 650 horsepower 70s supercar than it is to drive a basic sports car from the 90s. So this is a game about cars, right? What's the number one thing you want to do in a game about cars? Well, probably drive, right? So it's a pretty big ask to tell someone that they should play this game when the driving itself is so questionable. You might be asking, well, why did you even keep playing this game? And why did you come back for a second playthrough? Well, it's simple. This game's atmosphere is unmatched. Once you actually get past the questionable driving controls, you're greeted into an open world scenario where you can challenge anyone that you see with a blue dot above their head. Once you actually get into a race, it's not the traditional racing format that you would expect where you just have to cross a certain finish line first. Instead, both opponents are given a health bar. This health bar starts dwindling when someone crashes or the other person gets so far ahead that the other person starts draining SP. Oh yeah, you don't have HP in this game, you have SP. This is a really interesting idea because races in this game don't have a predefined start or end. You could challenge a boss to a race, and they crash into the back of a traffic car, and you win within 20 seconds. Whereas on the other hand, if you challenge some random guy in a Miata, turns out he actually put a V8 under the hood, and you're battling on the highway for 3 minutes at a time. I love this unpredictability, and there were multiple times throughout the game where the only reason that I won is because my opponent crashed. I don't know why, but whenever I got into an actual race, I found myself focusing on the driving and the music and what my opponent was doing, to the point where I forgot that the driving controls were even a problem to begin with. Now, don't get me wrong, this game would definitely benefit from having better driving controls, as the new game in the series proves, but despite that, I found myself having a really good time with this game, and even though the handling was really questionable, once I actually got to the later stages of the game and figured out how to get around its handling quirks, I started having a much better time. Your SP in races isn't the only thing you have to worry about though, as you have to worry about your engine temperature and tire wear. This means that if you're doing 9 or 10 races in a row, you have to think about what you're going to do next because your engine might be overheating or your tires might be losing so much grip that you're starting to slide into every wall. Now, me personally, I never really noticed the tire wear kicking in that much, but the engine temperature will definitely get you at the worst possible times. Most opponents in this game are part of racing teams that have multiple members, and once you defeat every person in a team, you have to race their boss. So if you just spent the past 20 minutes racing a whole bunch of people in order to race the final boss, and your car's about to overheat, you're almost guaranteed to lose. The hotter that your engine gets, the more performance that you'll lose. So at the start of the night, your car might have been pretty comfortable topping out at about 180 miles an hour, but if you overheat your car, you're lucky to go 155. This gets further complicated with turbochargers. Cars with turbochargers will gain heat a lot faster than those without them. This means that a car with a turbo might have better stats on paper, but a naturally aspirated car might be better in the long run if you plan on doing a lot of races. You also get a multiplier the more people that you defeat in a single night, so it's in your best interest to race as many people as you can. Turbo cars get an optional benefit though. If you go into the vehicle tuning section and turn up the boost, you can press the select button to give your car a temporary boost in power. The problem is, your car will heat soak a lot faster, so this should only really be used for emergencies. Now, naturally aspirated cars can do this too, but it's almost considered a cheat code because naturally aspirated cars have so many benefits already. If you hold down the select button whenever you enter a course, you can get 3 charges of nitrous which you can only use during a race. These 3 charges will actually heat your engine faster than the turbo boost will, but you will get a massive boost of speed, and this is really useful in some of the harder races in the game. I pretty much just use this as a last resort against the absolute hardest opponents. One thing that I keep asking myself is if TXR3 is a hard game or not, and I think the more accurate assessment is it's a bit unfair at times. The enemy opponents in this game are inconsistent at best. At the best of times, they're actually able to weave through traffic and keep up with you on the 2-lane highways of the game, but on the other hand, they'll hit traffic cars even when they're going on a straight road, and they can't take a corner to save their lives. This goes for you too though. The handling of this game is so awkward that collisions are just part of the game. It can be pretty anticlimactic when you grind through an entire section of the game and you hit the final boss only for them to hit a traffic car in a corner and you just drive away with no problems. This is the biggest problem with the difficulty in this game. If the races are on a straight highway, you'll actually get some really good racing, and sometimes the races can go on for minutes at a time, but the second there's a corner involved, the AI is bound to make a mistake no matter what type of car they're driving. The rivals all have different personalities in how they drive too. Some rivals will race cleanly while others will actively try to block you. They also have various degrees of driving skills. Some people are much more confident going into corners than others. Overall, once you get used to the intricacies and the quirks of the game, I found the racing to be really fun. It's almost like a game in and of itself, just going out on the highway and picking off racing teams one by one. If you just play the game, the rivals are kinda nameless and they don't really have a personality, but there's actually a tab in the main menu that'll show you a bunch of information about each rival that you face. Every single person that you race in this game is their own unique person and they have their own distinct car as well. The game also tells you their backstory and gives you a brief description of how they're going to drive. Along with the teams, you also have wanderers, which are just solo people racing like you. A lot of these wanderers will have much more strict requirements on if you want to race them. They might only race certain cars or only drive on certain days of the week. Some other requirements are absolutely ridiculous though, like you have to have a certain license plate on your car or a certain amount of stickers on your car. The problem is, the game never tells you this, and there's no way to really find out unless you just look it up online. A lot of these wanderers will race you no matter what though, and they're actually how you unlock a lot of the more interesting cars in the game. Between the Wanderers and the racing teams, the world feels really fleshed out, and it really feels like you're carving a name for yourself as you meet more and more teams as you go on through the story. One thing that I really appreciate is that everyone has their own name. Sometimes the names can be edgy, or insightful, or just flat out funny, and I really found that these added a lot of character to the game. You're also given something called a bad name. This is based on a bunch of different factors that we still don't fully understand yet, but some of the things that affect it are what kind of cars you like to drive, how aggressive you are, and where you like to go. There are hundreds of different names that you can possibly get, and every time that I got a new name, I pretty much knew the reason why it happened. It really reflected the previous session that you had as a driver. So, the way that the game is structured is you start the game off in the beginning area of Tokyo, and once you defeat everyone, you move on to the two other areas of the game, Osaka and Nagoya. These two other areas of the game are completely different to the C1 loop, and it really offers a lot of variety. Once you're done with Tokyo, you head on over to Nagoya, which is a much more open section of highway and is much more like oval racing. After this, you head on over to Osaka, which is a bit like a mix of the two. Once you defeat all the bosses in the beginning section of the game, you're finally moved on to Act 2 where you can move between each section freely. The areas open up too. Instead of just the C1, the entire Tokyo highway network is open up to you, and the other areas get a similar expansion as well. Because all of these roads are based off of actual highways in the real world, driving in this game feels a lot more authentic than other games. Some of the two-lane highways are so tight it's genuinely frightening, especially if it's raining once you're going over 300 kilometers an hour. The map itself feels so eerie. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but all the traffic cars in this game are actually the exact same van. It doesn't matter where you are on the map, the only other people that you're going to see are other racers and people driving these official looking vans. This combined with the pretty primitive graphics made the areas feel really desolate and empty. It really sold the feeling that you were in the middle of the night doing something that you weren't really supposed to be doing. When you start the game off in Tokyo, this is the section of the game that obviously had the most care and attention put into the map, and so it doesn't really feel that sparse and desolate, but once you start getting to the other areas of the game, there are long stretches where the only thing that you see is the road and the streetlights. When you're racing another person, you don't really notice this, but when the race is over and everything slows down and you just take a moment to take it all in, you start looking around and realize that there's nothing really out there. It started to give me the feeling of the unknown. I didn't really know what was out there and I'm not sure I really wanted to find out. This can be accentuated with some of the weather effects in the game. Whenever I was racing a boss on one of these empty stretches of highway in the rain or the snow, it felt like an otherworldly experience. This is one of the things that are missing from modern games, being able to fill in the blanks with your imagination. I kinda miss this feeling of exploration and discovery I got throughout the game because I really didn't know it was beyond the borders of the highway. With how many racing teams there are, the different wanderers, and the different descriptions on the rivals, it really felt like the world was bigger than it was. I think the highway networks they chose for the game are absolutely perfect, and I don't think the game would have been the same without all three of them. Something I wanted to touch on a little bit more was the actual cars in this game. The car list has a really good variety, and to my surprise, it's not just Japanese cars. There's also American and European cars in the mix as well. To give you an idea, there's a Dodge Viper, a Di Tommaso Pantera, a Lotus Europa and Esprit, Ford GT, a Gambala-tuned Porsche 911 and Porsche Boxster, a Mercedes 500e and an SL 500, a Mach 1 Mustang, a Trans Am, and a C4 and C5 Corvette. This is in addition to all the Skylines, Supras, and RX-7s that you would expect from a Japanese game. You also have Japanese K cars and K vans, along with luxury options. Every car that you buy also has tuning options, so if you buy a suspension kit, you can also choose how soft or firm that you want your ride, or you can change the gear ratios in your transmission. Honestly, this amount of tuning is still pretty good today, and this would have been absolutely mind-blowing to have back in 2003. I started the game off in a Nissan 300ZX, and while this car didn't handle very well at first, after putting some upgrades on it, it actually just became pretty fun to drive. It felt somewhat heavy, but I really felt like I could pull away against some of the opponents in the early game. The next car that I bought was an FD RX-7, and this car was an upgrade in every single way. It was faster, lighter, handled better, and it didn't even seem to heat up any faster. I'm pretty confident you can use this car for the entire game if you wanted to. After that, I bought a Celica GT4. I was hoping that I could get the RX-7 straight line performance while also having all-wheel drive, but sadly, this car just wasn't as fast as the Mazda in a straight line. It felt like a downgrade to be honest, and I kinda regret buying it. I still drove it and I thought it was pretty fun to use, but I wish I would have gotten earlier in the game. The car that I bought after this set me into financial ruin. Now, I had backwards logic in this game. See, in Japan, it would be cheaper to customize a Japanese car because the parts are right there. So if you buy an American car, it would be a lot harder to customize because you'd have to get the parts from America, right? So I went and bought a Di Tommaso Pantera, which has a Ford engine from a V8 Mustang. I just couldn't say no to driving an actual supercar on the Japanese highway network. The problem is though, upgrading this car was significantly more expensive than every other car in the game at this point, so when I upgraded the engine, I was pretty much broke. Trying to upgrade this car to keep up with 90s and 2000s cars honestly financially ruined me, and I wish that I didn't do it. I should have driven the RX-7 for a bit longer. At low speeds, the Pantera was pretty sketchy, but once you were going above about 120 miles an hour, it felt a lot more stable and it felt really agile going through the highway. After the Pantera, I didn't learn my lesson and bought a Dodge Viper. Surprisingly, this car handled a lot better despite having a much bigger engine. This ended up being my main car for the game, as I found it got up to speed really quickly and it handled really well despite the reputation this car has. Once I got towards the end of the game, driving this car felt like second nature, and no opponent could dare challenge my 9-gallon V10. I feel bad for all the vans that I hit going 190 miles an hour in this thing. After defeating the main boss in the game, I still had one more area to clear out, so I decided to spend this new credit bonus on a Lotus Esprit V8. The Lotus felt a lot more smooth to drive compared to the Viper and the Pantera. The engine wasn't as violent when you revved it out, but I actually found this car's handling to be unpredictable. Ironically, I thought the Viper actually handled better than this car. A majority of the game I was driving naturally aspirated rear-wheel drive cars, so it was nice getting the turbo in the Esprit, but the problem is the Esprit was still rear-wheel drive, so I wanted to fix that by buying a car that could deal with the extreme weather in the game a bit better. I ended up buying a Mitsubishi GTO. Despite the extreme weight, I actually found this car to handle really well, and it actually was really fast too. I had fun driving this car in the dry too, and I think you could probably beat the game in this car. Overall, I enjoyed every single car that I've driven in this game, and when you include the cars that I've driven from my first playthrough, I think every car in this game has their own distinct personality and their own strengths and weaknesses. While a couple cars are obviously not the best choice, like the Isuzu Via Cross or some of the K cars, any true sports car should get you through the game just fine. When it comes down to it, I think the cars in this game do a great job of making you grow with the car itself. The more that you drive and modify a car, the more it feels like it's growing with you as you play the game. So, Tokyo Extreme Racer's music is kind of a mixed bag. While I think a lot of it is really charming, and I think it fits the tones and the atmosphere of the game, some of the music sounds really grating because you hear the same tracks over and over and over again. One thing that I definitely can appreciate though is the music changes throughout the game, so as you get further throughout the game, you'll hear different tracks that you never even heard before. When you first start the game, I really like the music selection on offer. There's music for when you're cruising, racing someone, and there's specific themes for boss battles too. There's no sort of radio stations. Everything you hear is the same 3-minute track repeated over and over again, but for some reason, this doesn't bother me. Every time that I hear it, it's like some sort of Pavlovian association where I know it's time to hit the highway and start challenging rivals. When you move on to the next section of the game, the soundtrack steps up and becomes even more intense, and it really gets you into the zone, especially considering the speeds are a lot higher now that it's mostly straight roads. The problem that I personally have is in the final area, the music genre switches to a bit more of a 2000s rock theme, and this sounds like the part of the 2000s we should honestly leave behind. This sounds like the type of music that they would use on a Sunny D commercial on Nickelodeon. I found it really grating, and I think I personally started disliking this area of the game more just because of the soundtrack. There's also a soundtrack for the main menu of the game, and there's different songs for each sub-menu too, so there's different songs for the car shop, tuning window, etc. I found these songs to be really enjoyable, and they gave me strong Gran Turismo vibes. So the game has an interesting car list, good customization, the map is interesting, and there's a lot of characters and world building. How does it actually feel to go through the main story of the game? While it certainly has its ups and downs, I can definitely say that it was memorable. Going through each area and whittling down each racing team and defeating everyone one by one was so enthralling to me, and I'm not really sure why. The only motivation the game gives you to keep going is your own curiosity. I wouldn't say any of the actual cutscenes you get at the end of each section are particularly engaging and make you want to keep going, but the fact that you've already seen the journey this far means you want to see it to the end. It's like a personal quest to become better at driving in the game, and getting a better car that has more capabilities. I think this is actually something that's hinted at in the cutscenes of the game, but it just doesn't get translated over very well into English. It's that personal desire to get better at driving and to be the best racer on the C1. While some races definitely feel unfair, every single one feels like a learning experience for what to do next time. You make a mental note that you should have braked earlier there, or you could have carried more speed, or that you should have been more ballsy with the traffic. There's always something you could have improved on. Some of my absolute favorite moments in the game were if I didn't know if I was going to win or not. Sometimes I'd be in a long streak where after 9 or 10 wins, I was finally racing the boss of an area, and my engine was starting to overheat, and I decided to hit the nitrous anyway. It's kind of like having a captain goes down with the ship mentality, and whatever happens, happens. Sometimes it paid off, and I won with no repercussions, but other times, I lost the next race because my car was too hot, and I kicked myself for not knowing any better. I feel like you could play this game 10 different times, picking the exact same cars every single time, and having 10 completely different experiences and outcomes every single playthrough. There's so much unpredictability on the races to this game, it's what kept me coming back. That, combined with the really cool car list and the desolate locations that the highways gave me, made TXR one of the most interesting and unique racing games I've ever played. I don't think there's another racing game that comes anywhere close other than other TXR games. The best part is, if you try out this game and you decide that you like it, the modern TXR game has a lot of the same gameplay elements and adds nothing but improvements. The handling model is a lot better, and there's a lot more character development because you can actually talk to some of the people in the game at some of the rest areas. In conclusion, TXR is one of the most unique racing games that I've ever played. I really like its unique style of gameplay, and I can't wait to try out some of the other games in the series. While this game certainly has its downsides, I think its upsides more than make up for it, and I can recommend it if you like Japanese street racing culture.